You're watching the My Story episodes, and today we are here with the 12th episode of the same. We are joined with a very special guest today, Mr. Wajat Habibullah, who has been the first Chief Information Commissioner with the Government of India. It's my pleasure to have you here, sir.
Thank you.
So I'll start now that you have an extensive, journey of 45 years. You have served the government of India. I would like to start with how much transparency do you find in the government departments since when the RTI was introduced back then and till now?
Now, you see, a question of how much, what do you measure it with? The fact is that before the RTI Act came into operation, there was in fact no transparency. Information could be got, and as you know, there were scandals about leakage of information and so forth in government, but these were only available at a certain price, and which was not a compliment to the system of working, but in fact it was the case because the government was extremely insular. And it was, you had the Official Secrets Act, of course, but then the government acted in that manner to keep everything secret. The reason being that then it was considered, and this was even part of our training when I was a probationer in the academy, that the duty of the government official was to protect public information, and that public information was the property of the government. Now that has changed.
Yes.
Now it is understood that no, the information the government has is held in trust for the public. And in a democracy, the public is the last repository of governance. Actually, it's people who are elected by the public who actually run the government. In other words, they are servants, and they're called also public servants. They're servants to the public, and therefore they run the government. Therefore, the information the government has is public information. So what the law has done under the RTI Act is it recognizes the fact that for security reasons, for commercial reasons, certain information can be withheld. But the information as a rule is public property and has to be shared. Now this realization is coming. So you will understand that it's a very radical difference to what it was before the RTI Act came. Although with the Constitution of India, it's been held by several judgments of the Supreme Court under Section 19(1)(a), the right to information is in fact a fundamental right.
Yes.
But it was not recognized as such except by the judiciary. And that was in pronouncements, not in actual implementation. So that has been the radical change that has taken place. And therefore, the consequences of that have not necessarily been salutary, because then many people within the government have felt that it becomes their right to protect themselves that they must deny information to the public. Now that is a negative aspect, and the job of the Information Commission and others is to see that the government overrides that negative aspect and goes for the positive aspect, which is that that information that is held by the government should be available to the public whenever asked for.
All right, sir. You spoke about the transparency and that RTI because RTI से पहले जितनी भी information थी, you said that it was confined to the government departments. Now, if we talk about the today's government policy, which loophole do you still find there, which you would like to cure?
No, now of course there has been, and there has been considerable criticism that there has been regression in the opening up of information. Initially, opening up was quite rapid, and there was a lot of controversy and discussion. But the government did not really resist the opening up of information. But after that, there have been criticism about, like election bonds and so on, being kept outside the public domain, which people felt that no, it should be very much part of it. So it's a mixed bag. But so far as the transparency is concerned, now you see, when I started off the Information Commission, a very good example is that there were no websites. Some ministries had websites, some ministries didn't, and most ministries and departments, government departments, didn't have them. And the information that was provided on those websites was very, very limited. Now, under Section 4 of the RTI Act, this is being laid down in great detail as to what is to be the information that is to be uploaded is put in the public domain through internet. Sorry about that, just and the 120 items in which the government, the Act itself says the information should all be made public. It also, the Right to Information Act doesn't override the Official Secrets Act, which I feel it should have, but at the same time, it declares that that information should not be kept undisclosed under the Official Secrets Act if the public interest requires that it should be disclosed. So on all these grounds, therefore, that law is in force. The government has, and it's not only this government, earlier governments also, even the government that actually passed the law, there was a sense of resistance. It was not a resistance really from government itself. It was a resistance from people working within the government, as you can understand,
Yes.
who did not want their full information to be disclosed for various reasons. Not all of which are for reasons of corruption, which people suddenly jump to that conclusion, but for various reasons. Now, there's not enough time to go into that. But therefore, the government tendency is usually to keep the information undisclosed. That is also by habit, because we are trained for that. But there's also been an understanding among senior levels of government, mind you, who are colleagues of mine who confided in me that this has been a great help to us. Because if our political leadership wants to keep information undisclosed because it's not in their political interest, we can always tell them that, well, you see, we have to disclose it because it's the RTI Act. There's a law. We'll be running against the law if we don't disclose it. So we have to disclose this information. Therefore, it has also helped in that regard in restraining unrestrained use of power in favor of any political leadership, so on and so on. So there, as I see it, there has been progress. There has not been as much progress as you want. Now you had questioned that what is the position now? There has been one matter which has become an impediment in the implementation of the Act, and this is new. This is the new Public Data Act. You know that we had no law for privacy. Whereas it is my view that the right to privacy is as fundamental a right as the right to life itself in a democracy.
Very true.
But therefore, you need a right to privacy. In my judgment, in the Act itself, Section 8, there's a lot of information that is declared that it can't be disclosed. But there it has been repeatedly said that in keeping with the law of privacy, this information should be disclosed. So you have to therefore pass the test of privacy, whether the law of privacy would apply here. And the law that I applied to the Data Protection Act of the UK, which was a law that I applied in a number of cases, and it was upheld by our courts also. Because the UK law was the origin of our criminal procedure code in IPC. So therefore I should use it, and I use it effectively. But what has happened with the new Data Protection Act, I don't think there's anything wrong with the Data Protection Act itself, but in support of it, they have also amended the RTI Act itself, Section 8 of that, and therefore restricted the right of the citizen to access information which the PIO may consider to be private. So therefore, that's minimum.
About the privacy, we talk about the RTI. It's very important to know how a civil servant can balance, political pressures, especially, and with the ethics of the society, I must say.
As I mentioned, so far the civil servant is concerned, he was given through the RTI Act the tool through which to resist pressure by saying that, well, every information has to be disclosed under the law. You cannot keep it undisclosed, because if somebody wants it, then you have to give it. So that it's better not to do anything which you would not want to disclose. That greatly strengthens the civil servant, as you can imagine, because the civil servant normally gives the advice that what is under the law, the way that a certain policy can be actually implemented. In policy formulation also, the law gives the right to the citizen, because under Section 4, the person can ask, what was the need for this policy? the need for this policy, what were the decisions, what went into deciding this policy, and thereby a citizen can also point out to the government that this policy is defective for this reason, that these things have not been taken into account. That means that the citizen becomes a participant in governance. And a participant in governance is what even the president, when Modi was appointed, elected, in the BJP was elected, and Modi was elected Prime Minister in 2014, he had called this सबका साथ सबका विकास सबके साथ, mean that everybody must participate in the process of development, which actually means public participation in governance. He also distinguished between government and governance. And in the idea of governance, citizens were expected to take a part. Now, you and yourself can judge, the world can judge, I don't need to say anything about it, how far the citizen has actually become a part of the process of governance at present. I don't think that the progress made in that regard is a cause for satisfaction.
All right, all right. So now, if we talk about your years as a person who has served the public society and the public spirit, I would like to know some of the biggest hurdles you have faced in your postings, and which of them have been the most difficult ones for you.
No, they haven't faced any hurdles in my posting, because I was determined never to really choose or ask for any particular posting. There was only one posting I ever asked for, and when I was passing out, and I've written about this in my book also, you have mentioned my book on when I was finishing with my term in the Prime Minister's office, Rajiv did ask me where I would like to be posted, and I said I'd like to be posted to Lakshadweep, which is where I was. That is one of my nicest postings, certainly not one of my most difficult. So I have nothing really to say about, I held positions which were interesting, but my objective while working in governance, which from the very beginning was not the kind of importance that I was going to acquire, but the service that I could be to the people. That had been the gauge of my satisfaction with each of my postings. And therefore, the most difficult posting, of course, was when I was Commissioner Kashmir, because you didn't give me an easy time at all. But nevertheless, that was also my most rewarding time, because I developed, and you can be a better judge of that, but you would know that also, that I developed a relationship with the public, and there was an outright insurgency in the state at the time when I was commissioner. And I was on one side, I was of course on the side of government, on the side of restoring law and order, restoring governance, which is completely broken down. And on the other side were people where there was a general support for the insurgency. And yet, just by this system of listening to the grievances, listening to the problems of the people, I was able to come closer to the Kashmiris than I had ever come before. And that bond and that relationship remains. So naturally, that was my most satisfying posting, although it nearly, as you know, cost me my life, and I was nearly bumped off in the process. But yet, there is not any part of that posting that I regret. There is in that a great value. Although, of course, I feel that in my overall objective in what I had wanted to work for in Kashmir, which in any case, in my objective in working all over the country, which was really to make the people the actual rulers in India through this process of Panchayati Raj, and in Kashmir while handling the insurgency, that never was achieved. But at the same time, the friends that I made, the warmth that I received, the love that I received and was able to give, these are rewarding things for a person of my age.
That's true, sir. So, if you see the Indian democratic framework today, what according to you is the biggest challenge the country is facing?
This is the interesting thing, because one of the questions that you were going to ask me is, how I valued my relationship with Rajiv Gandhi, who was a friend.
I'll come to that.
Correct. But let me merge it into this, because it was in his time while I was serving with him. And this is because I was working on, I had initiated the process. He was wanting to, actually his objective was that this is the point that I'm mentioning to you, how is it possible make India the poorest in the country, which is Gandhiji's dictum. How can he be made, the poorest person in the country, be made to feel that he is part of his own government? And the answer that came about was Panchayat Raj. But that, of course, required me to do a lot of research on the subject. And the type of Panchayat Raj which we had visualized, which is not how it has become, was really what Gandhiji had seen. And that Gandhiji had said the real Swaraj will come when the poorest man becomes the person who actually dictates to the government what is to be done and is held accountable by the government is held accountable to him. Now, in that context, he had mentioned Panchayati Raj, in which he had talked to Panchayati Raj as institutions of self-government. You know, in Kashmir, you've been talking so much about self-government and so on and so forth. These panchayats were supposed to be institutions of self-government. They were not supposed to be only instruments of development, which is what they are now, but they were supposed to be institutions of self-government. And the Constitution itself, the Constitution Amendment 75, mentions them as institutions of self-government. Now then the RTI Act and a host of other measures were things in which I had a role to play, a fairly major role to play. I was also the first Secretary of Panchayati Raj in the country, in the government. So, am I satisfied with my performance in all these elements? No, I'm not. But did I make an effort? Yes, I did. And hopefully, those efforts, as India evolves, and democracy is a system which is always evolving,
Yes.
as you know. So, as India evolves, possibly my efforts in that direction will sometimes bear fruit. But yes, that was the objective of making government people-centric. That's the simplest way of putting it. Governance must be people-centric, which in my view is essential to a democracy.
All right. So, sir, as you already mentioned and merged about your book called My Years with Rajiv, so how has this very cordial friendship and relationship helped in shaping your journey overall, if I talk about?
Well, as I mentioned to you, it was not always. We were in school together. He was a year senior to me. His younger brother Sanjay was a year junior to me. Our parents had known each other. My grandfather had known his grandfather, his great grandfather. In fact, that was Motilal Nehru, who was a colleague of my grandfather's. When he was a judge of the Allahabad High Court, my grandfather was Vice Chancellor of Lucknow University, and they had a lot to do with each other. They had worked a lot with each other and knew each other very well. So families were friends. So in that context, of course, when Rajiv was and then of course my father was working in the government, and Jawaharlal Nehru was the Prime Minister, set up the National Defence Academy, which was a prize project of the then government of Prime Minister Nehru. So that relationship with them, therefore, when we were in school, we were what we would call home friends. You know, school friends and home friends. Term that we had said. And they had also visited us in Kharakbasta, where my father was commandant at the National Defence Academy. But at that time, Rajiv was not a particular friend. Sanjay was. Sanjay was a very naughty boy, but he was a good friend. It's much later, and even after I left the service, I joined the service, and of course Sanjay went off on a political career. We used to meet off and on, and were good friends for a long time. Then of course Sanjay passed away in 1982, and then Rajiv came into more active politics. Then I started becoming friends with him really because I was serving on the staff of his mother, Mrs. Indira Gandhi. So at that time we used to meet a lot. But whether we were friends or not, I can't say. Then, of course, when I was working as subordinate, we were familiar with each other, and we would always talk a lot about to each other. I mentioned in my book also the various policies that he formulated, and he was a pioneer in many of these things, particularly in the modernizing the government and computerization and software and so on. All these things we talk about frequently, but he then became, I hadn't realized it then, but he became something of a mentor. And it's after I handed over and went away to Lakshadweep that he really became a very good friend. Unfortunately, it was not a long period because he had handed over power in 1989, and so it was only 2 or 3 years that I was able to really become very close to him. But yes, I greatly value that I've made a lot of friends and in Kashmir, and I have some lifelong relationships that have developed
Yeah.
amongst.
So my last question to you would be, out of all your works which you have penned down, especially the book called My Years with Rajiv, for the readers globally, what would be the best takeaway?
Now, what is the takeaway? I think the theme of my whole career has been how well have I served my people, my countrymen, my community within that country, and the state where I served. All these three elements are what I would call the takeaway. But you have to judge me on that basis. I don't think I would like to be judged on the basis of how many people I helped, because in Mrs. Gandhi's office I was looking after the 20-point program. So I wouldn't like to be assessed by data as to how many people crossed the poverty line when I was looking into that Garibi Hatao program. That's not like how I would like to be judged. I would like to be judged with how I have served my people. And with my people, as I said to you, I mean my countrymen, that means the people of India, my community, yes,
Yes, that's the
certainly.
spirit.
And of course, the people of Jammu and Kashmir, where I had not had the opportunity to serve much in Jammu, but I did have the opportunity of having a very fulfilling 3 or 4 years as Deputy Commissioner Poonch, which was at that time a part of Jammu Division. Again, a very satisfying part of my career, because at that time it was just after the 71 war. So as a consequence of that war, there were lots of very great difficulties, and today you have this great Mughal road. Only initiated, it started recently, but I had the proud distinction of having actually opened that and proposed that. And I remember that Mir Nasrullah was at that time the commissioner, and Mr. Khajuria was the DIG, and said the army will never agree. And when I put it to the army, they agreed most readily. So that also tells you about misunderstandings. I think that was also another achievement, developing a better understanding. I worked extremely closely with the army in the days of when I was DC Poonch, yes, and of course at the time that I was handling the insurgency, particularly in the question of Hazrat Bal, and there we had a lot of disagreements. You would also come across criticisms by no less than the army commander of the way I had handled it. But there was no disagreement on the objective. We were working towards a common objective, and we may have disagreed with the way that we were doing it. But we all were in agreement that we worked towards restoring peace and harmony in Kashmir. And to that extent, I feel that because of my own background in the army, I was a little helpful. But that is really not for me to judge. It is the people of Kashmir, the people of the rest of the country, to judge whether I have been of any use to them at all, or I'm just an old fogey, in days of retirement saying, "Arey bhai, maine ye kiya ya wo kiya."